are dominating the schooling system from grade school to graduate school. Now women are 66% of graduates. So we're seeing it all over. And so men hopefully will get the wake-up call, hey, I'm kind of feeling bypassed here, or these women are asking more of me, or they're not putting up with my bullshit anymore. And so to me, it's going to be an external force of men to say, I've got to step up, gain my skills, up my game so I can relate in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. I like that you went into the history of that, because even though we may only live now, our culture is a part of us. Our heritage is a part of us. And the beliefs that we were raised with, like it or not that they become our beliefs, but they inform who we are. So yes, for me, I know being raised by a woman who was raised by a very traditional woman, who was raised by a very traditional woman, I hold a lot of traditional beliefs that are separate and distinct from who I am and for who the culture is today. And I believe that men have that as well. For a long time, men have known in their heads, oh, I can have feelings, I can have emotions, people want that. But I think in their hearts, they still see their fathers and their grandfathers and their, uncles and cousins saying, don't cry, don't cry, don't be a wimp, be man up. So I like that you brought that history in, because it's a lot that we're overcoming. We're not just overcoming ourselves. We are all overcoming our history as well.
Indeed. Completely. And, I call it the scripts. The scripts of our fathers and grandfathers are not working there. And they are in your subconscious. They're in your psyche. Do not fool yourself to think that you're not impacted by those generations after generations. Like, I had to confront my chauvinism. I had to confront my misogynistic nature. And they're still in there. The programs of being a chauvinist are still in my system. I still feel them. I see them. The only difference after 20 years of work is now I'm aware of them. And instead of letting a chauvinistic thing come out of my mouth when I'm interacting with a woman, I'm like, nah, that's not going to work out so well. Why don't we try this instead? Oh, curiosity and humor. Yeah, that's a better choice. And so it's just an awareness. And so the chauvinistic part of me is still there. It's just not running the show like it used to.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you acknowledge that, because it's my guess that people listening to the show might feel a certain sense of shame around knowing that they want to do better, knowing that the culture is shifting, and then feeling kind of that shame and that, gosh, I really feel this way. Oh, how am I going to overcome that? It's okay to feel those feelings. It's okay to have those thoughts, whether they're chauvinistic or, broadening the scope, racist or whatever. It's only when we admit, yikes, this is coming up in me, that we can change. Because if we hide them, there's no opportunity for growth or development or for meaningful conversation and change.
Right. And remember that these were scripts handed to you. They're part of your collective. Eckhart Tolle in The New Earth talks about it. Our pain body is passed down from generation to generation. And so, I had to confront someone. Someone said, my teacher said to me, you're chauvinistic. And I'm just like, no, I'm a nice guy. No, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, no, you're a chauvinist. And so the lack of seeing it was having it being reinforced. And once I saw it, and then once I took it apart, then I had choice. Just like you mentioned, in the choice, that's where the growth is.
Right. So speaking of choices, as you are making choices to become more revealed, to become more conscious and awake and aware, are you finding that the men around you are supporting this change, or are you receiving some pushback from people?
I've been on this road for a long time, so 20 years. So I'm 40, I'm almost 49. So almost, close to half my life, or 40% of my life, I've been on this journey. And I can tell you in the beginning, I lost many friends who I would speak in a way, and I was also unskilled in not being arrogant around my expansion. But I really lost a lot of friends who weren't having the same dialogue. It's difficult for me not to relate to someone in the same conversation. So, in the last 20 years, my friends and the men around me tend to be in the same conversation. So, I live on the West Coast. We have the West Coast jargon, the West Coast, revolution. So I'm lucky to live in this bubble with a lot of minded men. Like Saturday night, we're having a man's dinner, and most of them are teachers and coaches where we can talk about this. That said, it's really on me to modulate my arrogance to someone who's just starting. And that's been a journey in itself, because to me, it's so obvious. And to someone else, it's something new. It's like going to a new country or learning a new sport. And so my hope is, when I talk about this, and my hope of the book, the way I wrote it, was it to be conversational, to not come from a pedestal. I had my advanced readers come in. It's like, this part's a little arrogant, Rob. I'm like, okay, got it. Thank you so much for revealing that. And so my hope is, in the book, it's a pragmatic, simple to use, simple to read, conversational book to give these viewpoints. And there's probably 50 viewpoints in there in that book. And if one can change your life, then I feel happy. So my hope is that it's very straightforward to understand, no matter where you are in your journey.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And earlier you had kind of given the caveat that you were only speaking from your perspective, which, is the white male perspective. Mm-hmm. And although I appreciate that, and I do appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, what I like about some of your work and some of the things that you've talked about is the fact that we all embody a certain amount of masculine. It doesn't matter our gender, our race, our sexual orientation. We all have a certain percentage of male, female. We all have that certain, tendency to hide or to cover. So it's nice that you have your perspective, but I also think your perspective can bridge a lot of gaps, because we all embody a lot of different energies within us all at the same time.
Definitely. I mean, I wrote a book for men because there's not many great books out there for men. Mm-mm. And most of the great books out there were really written in the 1990s. There's 5 or 6 amazing books from great authors and great revolutionaries in the 1990s and early 2000. Not to say there aren't some great books out there for men, but I wanted to write a pragmatic, not 1990s. I wanted to write one from 2018 perspective, because we live in a different world, just from the gender dynamics I was talking about, but also from technology aspects, which has highly impacted our world in the last 10 or 15 years. So I wanted to write it for that.
Talk a little bit about that, if you would, the
Sure.
technology piece.
Well, it's, when I was growing up, in the 70s and 80s, we were dependent on the phone, this thing that was attached to the wall that connected us. There was no email. There was no electronic messaging. There was certainly not a computer that sat in our pocket, accessible at all times. We had phone, we had letters, and we had in person. That was pretty much the only way to interact with human beings. And so then really the start of 2000, the start of the 21st century, 2005, 2006, is when electronic messaging came around. So let's say it's 15 years old, and the cultural shift we've had in terms of electronic messaging, where we've lost really incredible amount of information. We lose tonality, we lose facial gestures, we lose in person. People are preferring, myself included, to depend on electronic messaging to meet rather than the face-to-face pulling in the all the details of person to person. That's one. The second is that the phone has invaded our lives. Like, I go to restaurants and I see couples sitting on the phone at a table. They're not interacting with each other. They're interacting with their phones. I'm just like, huh. And kids, there's so many studies out there, the impact of screens on kids. And as a co-parent to an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, I can attest to this, of the insane addiction that kids already have around phones. So the impact has been a loss of intimacy, a loss of personality, and a loss, I think, in terms of our ability to relate, because we moved from face-to-face or voice connection to electronic, which is not linear. It's like you can text someone at 2:00 in the afternoon and they respond back at 3:45 and you respond back at 5:15. It's not like we on the phone where you have to deal with the uncomfortable silences of it. So electronic technology has really impacted relating in the 21st century.
It really has. It's funny. I just have to interject. There have been a couple of fights, not really fights, but disagreements that I've gotten into with my husband because my text will say it's read. So I'll assume that he's read it since it says read. And then when I do call him or I'll see him, I'll say, why didn't you, pick up the milk or whatever? I texted you. Like, well, I didn't get it. And then I'll say, but I saw it said it was read. And then the concept of, no, just because I'm scrolling through on my phone doesn't mean I read it. I saw that a text came in, I didn't read it. And you're right, it causes problems, it inhibits communication. So for men who already have a more challenging time tuning into their emotions, understanding, empathy, relating, all that, it seems like that's making it much harder.
For sure. I mean, really, it's a man's dream on some part to be able to, communicate via less emotional, more efficient. I mean, I love it. I'm not trying to put myself apart. Like, I love the use of electronics for efficiency and for communication. The only difference is I've learned the negative impact. And so I will not ever again argue over electronic devices. That is out. Like, I start to get a little scuffle with my wife. I'm like, let's jump on the phone or let's wait till we see each other face to face. I'm not going to argue over text messages. It is horrible. I will not interact with my phone anymore before I leave the house in the morning. So that's a relatively new rule that's really already impacted things. So when I wake up in the morning, I've started writing in a journal, a gratitude list. I'll interact with my wife, I'll interact with the kids, and I don't look at my phone besides looking at the time before I leave the house. Once I leave the house, then I can turn on the radio, I can listen to a podcast, I can listen to a book, I can check my social media, but that's really impacted things. When I come home, I put my phone and put it on the corner. And so dinner time is screenless for all of us. That's really changed things. And so you can start to make these small, minute changes to get back to the human-to-human relationship to improve. Now, here's one little tidbit, is that I've read reports the makers of the screens do not allow their children to have screens.
Wow. That says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. The makers of the screens know the addictive aspects that they've programmed into their products, and they don't even allow their own children to have it. So if you're addicted to a screen, if you want to improve your relationships, I talk about that quite a bit in the book about how to make simple, pragmatic tweaks to improve your relating with or without phones.
I like that you said tweaks because that makes them doable. You're not telling people, move to an ashram for 6 months and meditate, and then you'll be better. It's what's small, what's doable, what might speak to somebody.
Right.
So for men who realize that they may have a hard time with their emotions, both the feeling of them as well as the expressing of them, do you have any tips for them to help them kind of start getting back in touch with that? If they live, say, in a part of the country where there are no men's groups.
Well, luckily we live in, the flip side of what I just said is we live in an electronic rich environment. So, not living in a place, we have Zoom, we have Skype, we have face-to-face. There are men's groups that meet online. There are programs. There are great men's communities on the web. Connor Beaton's Man Talks community is one of my favorites out there in the world. I'm actually building a page, robertkandell.com/men, which lists other resources out there that you can find and you can interact. There's plenty of programs out there that meet. John Wineland has a great program out there. He's a great man doing great work. So there's no more excuses anymore. And you can create a men's group with one friend, and you don't have to show all your emotions at once. like you can start to create games with your men friends, like saying, can we talk once a